Hi, my name is Aja Monet, and I'm really honored to be with you. Thank you for having me. This poem is called A Love Supreme. Because their anger is not ours to carry, their bullets or brokenness. Because hopeless is not our horizon, because healing is a duty and obligation, because God is a holy action, a woman who changes with weather, because in between we dance, because times are hard and we are timeless, because we cherish the groove and ground we walk on, water and wishes well worn, because we suffer without defeat, refusing to be destroyed, because we miracle and magic, charm and spell, because we forgive but never forget. We know justice isn't determined by a judge, because karma never dies. For the wizards and ways of our defiance, visions of our rising, risen selves, overcoming grace, fire spitter tongues, wise as rickety rocking chairs, suffering salt and sand skies, memories unshackled, shining stitches on a stretch marked heart, for the flowers that bloom in midnight scars, how we suffered and sought a north star when there was no light. We glowed and sparked, this rejoice, this righteous delight, this reunion, a longing to be held, the endless embrace. We got a cause to take joy in. How we weathered and persisted, tenacious, no stone unturned, moon shining, shared laughter, patient smiles, reminiscing on first times, mistakes, and unrequited loves, playful and fresh, kinfolk codes of cool, calm, and copacetic, how we witnessed the horror of mankind, and we did not become that which horrified us. A love so supreme.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace be upon all of you. It's Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Thank you. Thank you all for your work. I know the National Immigrant Integration Conference brings so many folks from across the country together to fight for our immigrant neighbors and our refugees. I know as a child of immigrants, this is so important. Many of you are working at organizations that my family benefited from. They could have never imagined, my father with 4th grade education, my mother 8th grade education, to see their daughter graduate from high school, college, law school, and then get sworn as one of the first Muslim American women into the United States Congress. But it's because your organizations, your work are opening up doors for the possibility of people like me running for office and being in the room when our immigrant parents, our immigrant families are being discussed. And I know that the work that you are doing is going to inspire the next generation of Congress members and maybe the President of the United States. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your work and for courage to continue to fight for immigrant neighbors, especially during this really dark time in our country. You all bring so much light. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Representative Tlaib, and thanks to Aja Monet for giving us some renewed energy and love as we go into this next session. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to tonight's special session, Women's Leadership for a New Era. This powerhouse session will conclude the National Immigrant Integration Conference opening day. Today, throughout NIC, we talked about the current state of U.S. democracy, making sense of this important moment of racial reckoning, and heard remarks from Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. My name is Nana Jumphy, and I will be one of tonight's moderators. I'm the Executive Director of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, the largest Black-led immigrant rights and racial justice organization in the country. My family is from Ghana, and growing up, I was inspired by the natural brilliance and leadership of my late mother and the elder matriarchs of our family and community. I continue to be inspired by Black migrant-rooted women like Nse Ofot, Executive Director of New Georgia Project, fierce abolitionists Mariam Akaba and Andrea Ritchie, and the late, great Audre Lorde. Black women and women of color all over the world are stepping into our greatest legacies and turning this world, in the words of Sojourner Truth, right side up. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to my co-moderator, Maria Rodriguez, who will walk us through what you can expect from tonight's session.
Thank you, Nana. It's such an honor to share the screen with you and to be co-moderating this conversation this evening with some amazing powerhouse women. I'm Maria Alegria Rodriguez, and I serve the members of the Florida Immigrant Coalition who inspire me every day across this peninsula that is seeking more sunshine all the time as we're looking to transform our communities. We know the role of women has been absolutely vital in creating lasting change, not just in surviving, but in thriving. And our ambition is not just to be transactional leaders, but really transformational agents. And we have to understand the battle of terrain being personal, organizational, movement, and society. And this has been true throughout history and throughout the globe and remains true today. Nana and I are honored to be joined by some of the country's greatest organizers, leaders, and change makers who share their insights on how to lead in this new era.
Tonight, we have not just one, but two powerhouse panels. Maria kicks us off with the first panel, and then I'll join you to introduce you to our second panel. Please add questions for our panelists into the chat. We'll be addressing those questions at the end of this session. Maria, take it away.
Yay. Get yourself comfortable, get your beverage of choice, and get ready to sit and commune and create community with these amazing women. The first question we're going to be contemplating is, given the stressors, the levels and dimensions of decision-making and change and everything that we're holding, the challenge of staying with our spirit of generosity and with sisterhood. And we'd like to hear from some of these panelists, how they keep that spirit and how they maintain that commitment to that solidarity and spirit of generosity. We'll start with Rosa Gomez-Herrin, a scholar, community advocate, urban planner, writer, and strategist at Operation Restoration. And I'm going to ask each of the panelists to share a little bit about themselves as you begin to share about keeping this spirit of generosity. Rosa?
Hi, everybody. My name is Rosa. I am an immigrant from Lima, Peru. I'm an Afro-Latina, Afro-Peruvian. Being in the US for most of my adult life now, super excited to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm in New Orleans, and I work for an organization that works with women and girls impacted by incarceration and detention. So the way I share my spirit of generosity in my leadership, so I'm intentional about sharing my time, my insights, and my connections with other women, particularly with Black women in the movement, because they have shared so much with me. And to me, this comes from looking at my own leadership style from an abundance position and no scarcity. I am committed to be as inclusive as possible in my decision-making process. So as you might understand, that takes time and planning, but I always reach out to different people to get different perspectives, which in turns I have found that allow people to feel like their perspective is valued and also creates more cohesiveness in my team. So yeah, I think my generosity is that I, as a leader, as a supervisor, as a person with a level of power in my organization, I don't make any decisions that impact someone else's workload without including them in the decision-making process.
I love that. I love that shifting of attitude of scarcity to abundance, including the ability for people to self-determine collectively with, I'm sure, accountability, et cetera, but their work. So thank you, Rosa. That's beautiful. And so glad to know that you're there in New Orleans and connected to the Afro-Peruanas. So thanks for joining us. I'd like to then pass it on to Sulma Arias, who we know and love as the Director of Immigration and Power Building at the Fair Immigration Reform Movement of Community Change. Sulma has been an organizer, a movement builder, a strategist, a trainer, all kinds of roles. And Sulma, tell us a little bit about how you're approaching staying juicy and generous, especially in these times.
Sure. Thank you, Maria. It's great to be here. You know, I'm also an immigrant from El Salvador. And when I grew up, I grew up surrounded by 4 incredible women, my sisters. I am the youngest of 4 sisters. When I was 6 years old, my mother died, and the 4 of us were left to fend for ourselves. My oldest was 19, a 17-year-old, a 10-year-old, and I was the youngest. So from a very young age, I learned to lean on, to trust the wisdom, the genius of women. And we went through a lot together, but we came through. And now I'm 50 years old, and I'm blessed to have 3 daughters who are, you know, old, over 21. And I am just so blessed that I can relay that same trust in women. So in my generosity, a spirit of generosity, what I lead with is, I think, similar to Rosa, is just the fact that the generosity that was given to me as a child without a mother from the age of 6 had such an impact in my life and the life of my sisters, and now the life of my daughters, that, you know, those acts of like, there is enough, and there is enough room, there's enough time, there's enough space, there are enough resources. And if we need more space, we as women, we just go and build a bigger table, right? We do whatever it needs to get done to include all of us. And I believe in that so strongly, because the generosity that was extended to me, even by strangers, you know, literally saved my life, and it impacted, and it will impact for generations to come. My daughters, who also look into the world now to extend that generosity, because they know my story, they know the story of my family and my sisters, and now there's no way that they can look at the needs of the world and the needs of other women without that lens of, this was given to me, and it's my obligation and my duty to go into the world and extend that same generosity to others. So that's how I come into the work, you know, for the last 20 years that I've been part of this, and for the, you know, 50 years that I've been on this earth. Thank you for the question, Maria. I'm so glad to be here.
Such a foundational experience, Sulma, that has shaped you as such a beautiful and powerful leader. Thank you for sharing that vulnerability and that strength. Sometimes we want to stay tender, but we have to understand being tender doesn't mean being fragile. And I think you exemplify that in your leadership. So thank you so much. It's my honor to now introduce Virginia Kase, who for the last 25 years has been the CEO of the League of Women Voters, a 100-year-old organization. So Virginia, please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you approach your leadership in these times as it relates to the spirit of generosity.
Well, I will say that I have not been the CEO for 25 years, for past 2 years. Wow. But I did start organizing 26 years ago. That's when I first started in my hometown in Hartford, Connecticut. And I am fortunate that I've held a lot of different positions in the movement, always behind the scenes, though. I think that's one thing about a great organizer is you're always putting other people forward. And so I'm just very fortunate to be in this role right now. But I think this is such an important topic for so many of us. I will say that I didn't start my organizing work. I didn't start my work in the movement because I was whole. I started this work because I was broken. I was a teenage mom, a foster child. I had 2 kids. I was pregnant with my second child, and my child's father was wrongfully incarcerated by the police for a crime that he didn't commit. And gang violence in the community that I grew up in was running rampant. And I saw this happening, and other folks saw that it was happening, and we knew we needed to do something, and nobody was doing anything. So we formed a nonprofit called the Hartford Youth Peace Initiative. And I was young and didn't know what I was doing, but I had great community leaders. But the thing that I noticed was that all of the organizers and the community leaders that I had to look up to where I lived were men. There were so few women that I had to go to. So where I was from, I was one of the first, until I was able to find that sisterhood through being able to work nationally with other folks. But I talk about that brokenness because I recognize that much of the work that we do, and many of us come to this work because we have been so deeply impacted for whatever reason, whatever our entry point is. And that in some cases, with that brokenness, it requires us to be able to have safe spaces to land. So when I talk about my spirit of generosity, I really try to focus on being a safe space for others to land. Sometimes you just need that moment of respite to be able to unload, to cry, or just to be able to be in fellowship and in that sisterhood and that community, to be able to renew and refill your spirit in a safe way without judgment. And so I've really tried to make sure that I do that. And I think it's also to be a reminder to other women of their worthiness and of their power. And I think we all use the word power all the time because it's at the core of so much of what we believe. But I think that when you have that vulnerability in a place, in a space to be vulnerable, that helps you to recharge your power. It's like recharging your batteries so that you can go out and face this work and continue to do it joyfully because you know you have people behind you who are supporting you. And I think last but not least, I try to remind, because 26 years, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for a long time. But at the same time, I try to remind myself that the women that I come into contact with, they are my replacement. They're the people who are going to care for me when I am no longer able to do this work. They're going to carry on this torch. And so I try to lead in that way and share in that way with them.
Thank you, Virginia. And of course, you haven't been there 25 years, but we're lucky that you've been an organizer for 25 years. And that same kindness and generosity that we show others, we really have to show to ourselves as we are embracing our brokenness, which you so eloquently spoke about. I know for me, organizing has saved my life, and I think for many others, we share that experience as well. Thank you for your amazing leadership of this national institution that's so important to our democracy. And finally, we get a chance to hear from Sayu Bhojwani, who we know as the visionary and the founder, and now president of the New American Leaders. She understood early on that we needed to create that leadership pipeline and a powerhouse in her own right, but she's also building a network of incredible powerhouse immigrant women and men across the country. Sayu, what say you?
What say I is I would love to have a longer conversation with Rosa and Sulma and Virginia about the spirit of generosity, because I'm so inspired by all that they've shared. I am actually one of those twice migrant people. I was born in India, but raised in Belize. So I came to the United States as an international student. And I think I came to organizing as a way to find myself and, who I would be in this bizarre racial landscape that is artificially imposed on us here in the United States. And that led me to the work that I do. And I think the way that I exercise my spirit of generosity, as you said, Maria, is to facilitate other people's leadership. That there are different ways in which all of us are leaders. And I decided a little over a decade ago that the best role that I could play was to help other people see in themselves what I saw. That's very much the way that we work at New American Leaders. But I also, as I think Sulma said, that, feel very, very committed to giving back what has been given to me and to demystify the access and networks that I have, that we have accumulated positional privilege I wake up every morning and still see myself as a little immigrant girl from Belize, but I know that that is not how most people see me. And I do have access and networks, making introductions, encouraging people to apply. So on a tactical level, it's very much about demystifying and providing access and networks. But on a kind of spiritual level, it's about understanding how each of us is connected to the other, and that my own individual advancement really means nothing if my community and our communities are not advancing alongside each other.
Absolutely, that interdependence and our fates being intertwined, and our responsibility, just like we've received, to have that reciprocity to give forward. And that leads us to the second question of this first panel, which is, what are some of the lessons that you'd like to offer those women who are newer to the movement and looking to find their place? Are there any admonishments or important ways of being that you want to inculcate or share or bring forth to the new generations? And let's shift it around and have Virginia respond first.
Oh, sure. There's so many lessons learned. I think one of the things that I learned early on that was that my anger can either fuel you or consume you. And that I need to allow it to fuel my work, because it is so easy to consume you. And that this work really does you have to lead with love in this work. And so it's just a very important thing to make sure. I think creating safe spaces for you to nurture your spirit, because so many people will need so much from you, that it's something that I think is really important. And then I think the last thing would be to honor those who came before you. I always like to think like I'm this great innovator, right? But at the end of the day, I realize that I'm doing what other people have done, maybe a little bit differently. And that there are so many people who worked hard and built this work out, and that we have to honor them in this. And acknowledge the people who came before us. And so those are some of the things that I would say.
Thank you so much, Virginia. I love that, balancing the rage that fuels us forward with the love that grounds us. So thank you so much. Rosa, is there anything from your perspective that you'd like to pass on to the newer leaders?
Yes, thank you so much. And I agree with everything Virginia said and the other panelists before me. I think for me, the main lesson learned is to lead with integrity, which can be quite challenging at times, especially in the nonprofit industrial complex and in the larger society that we live in, but it's not impossible, right? I think that for me, what I had to do in order to do this is kind of unlearn a lot of the lies that white supremacy and colonization have taught us. So life is not linear. It is okay to evolve and to change and to kind of change your positions in life. And also we're a lot more than our mistakes. So I think what I've learned in my 20 years in the sector is being clear about my ideology or my philosophy for social change, while staying open to new ideas and different perspectives, is how being able to stay grounded and true to my own values and principles. So I would say leading with integrity for me is about centering your identity and your people in everything you do. This is definitely going to help you kind of distinguish between talk and action, because there is a lot of talk going on, and I'm a kind of action-oriented person. But also, making sure that my stated values match my actions and my words, which is a constant challenge and a constant, back and forth with myself, really, to see where I am. Because if, a friend of mine told me many years ago, if your values do not match your actions, then you need to change either your values or your actions. So keeping always that in mind, to lead with integrity and also know with certainty, which has been also a difficult decision for me to make a couple of times, is that you can and you should walk away from toxic work environments and from places where your integrity is being compromised. So that will be my advice.
Mhm. Thank you, Rosa. So much wisdom there about being whole with what you believe and what you think and what you do. And that gives us the strength. Thank you so much. And the courage to sometimes step away. That's real talk, keeping it 100%. Sayu, I know you mentor a lot of young women. You spoke a little bit about that already. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I just want to say, before I start sounding como una bruja, let me say what I have learned from younger people. I am the mom of a 14-year-old, but also work with a lot of younger women. And it has been really beautiful for me to learn through them about caring for yourself. And I think that the challenge that I would, going back to the bruja hat now, which I wear very well, especially now that I'm over 50, that there's a challenge sometimes where you're balancing caring for yourself and being motivated by selfishness. I think that's it can be a complicated challenge, let's put it that way. And so we have to really be watching. And I think that's for all of us, regardless of age. A couple of other things I want to add. One is, many of us are good at many things. It does not mean that we need to do all of those things. Just because you're good at it, just because you're faster at it, doesn't mean you need to do it. A friend of mine talks about, just because there's a buffet doesn't mean you have to eat everything. And I think that's a really important thing for, particularly for highly motivated immigrant women. If you're the eldest daughter of an immigrant family, you need to really remember that you are going to be good at a lot of things. You're going to be called to do a lot of things. Does not mean you need to do all of those things. And then lastly, again, something I have to remind myself, I'm in the middle of a transition, as you kind of indicated. I'm leaving New American Leaders to start a new project that is going to focus exclusively on women of color in elected office. And I'm reminding myself every single day, even as I feel deeply depleted, that there is time, that this is a marathon and not a sprint, and that I can take 2 weeks or 3 weeks, a month. It took us 200 years to become this messed up a democracy and country, and we have time to fix it. So remembering that, you don't have to eat everything from the buffet. It's a marathon and not a sprint, and not, conflating selfishness with self-care.
I don't know. I've thank you so much, Sayu. I'm touched by so much of the beautiful wisdom that these women have shared, and I think that if we were on a stage in front of, 3,000 people, as Nick often is, we might not have had this level of intimacy as we share. I know many people are watching on many platforms, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you for not just what you do, but who you are and your thoughtfulness and sharing those pearls of wisdom. I'd like to turn over to Nana now, who'll guide us with a second dive with some other amazing women, national leaders. And to remind you, please, if you have questions for the panelists, use the chat and help deepen or expand this conversation as you'd like. We'll be coming together at the end of this second panel to have that conversation. Nana, back to you.
Thank you, Maria. That was quite powerful. You did not disappoint. Definitely got so many goodies, and I'm really hoping that folks from the next generation heard some of those goodies and are going to follow up with some of these leaders that are here to get some more goodies. Mentorship is so important. And I know for some of us, we're a little older than others, and there weren't as many women who were able to be mentors, especially women of color. So really appreciative for that. And I'm going to be joined now by some more powerhouse women that will build onto the dynamic conversation in our first panel. Through the years, we've witnessed and benefited from the stalwart leadership of women. Today, women, especially Black women and other women of color, continue to pave the way in countless ways. Most recently, women of color were instrumental in the defeat of racism and xenophobia we've seen rise in the last few years. Throughout NIC, we are discussing how to heal, overcome, and rebuild in this country. So I want to introduce and welcome our second panel to dig deep, as they dug deep in the first panel on these issues. I want to start out with Greisa Martinez Rosas. She is the executive director of United We Dream and United We Dream Action, the largest immigrant youth-led network in the country with more than 800,000 members. For the last 8 years, Greisa has been a key architect in United We Dream's political strategy, implementing the vision of the members of UWD as the organization continues to build power throughout the country. Greisa plays an instrumental role in bringing movements together to advocate for the rights of immigrants, women, Black and brown. Linda Sarsour is an award-winning racial justice and civil rights activist and community organizer. She's a Palestinian Muslim American born and raised in the Republic of Brooklyn, New York. She's the co-founder of MPowerChange and co-founder of Until Freedom. Linda was one of the national co-chairs of the largest single-day protest in U.S. history, the Women's March on Washington. This year, Linda released her highly anticipated book, We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders, a memoir of love and resistance. She's most recognized for her transformative intersectional organizing work and movement building. And then all hail the queen, Nicole Melaku, the executive director of National Partnership for New Americans. She brings over a decade of experience working on immigrant and refugee issues at the local, state, and national level. As executive director, she works to harness the collective power of NPNA's 41 member organizations across 37 states to advance immigrant integration efforts through advocacy, organizing campaigns, and policy initiatives. And I would be remiss if I didn't let all of you know she has been central to making sure that Black migrants are centered at this year's historic virtual NIC. Thank you all for joining us. I want to build on something the previous panel touched on and hear from you on this idea of leading with generosity and the lessons learned as women leading in the movement. Would love to hear how you do this and why it's imperative, especially as we're in this transitionary period with many new political and other opportunities on the horizon. Nicole, let's start with you. How are you leading with generosity?
Sure. Thank you, Nana. What a powerhouse group. Oh my goodness. This is like one of the conversations we get to have on any one of the days where I would pick up the phone and call one of you. So I'm glad other people are able to be privy here. I lead in the way that I'd lead with love, of course. And I think one of the things that I remember my mother always saying was that I love each of you like the hands on my fingers, and each of you are so unique and so different, but the hand cannot work without all of your individuality and your individual gifts. And so when I think about other women in this work, in this field, the women we serve, I try to always center myself in the role that each of us play in our movement and in our communities and in our homes and in our families. And so when I am looking at this network and this beautiful, compilation of women leaders here, I try to center the North Star, and each of us are really driven by the North Star, which is the best for our communities, right? And so though we may not all have the same tactics or use different or get to reach different constituencies, I think together we're building a better vision for our country. And so I try to always center the way that I offer space, the way that I take space, the way that I also make room and mentor other young women and other leaders in our work is really about creating space, because so many of us have had to fight for every little piece of space and have sharp elbows. And it really is up to us to show up differently and to really make sure that we are in fact practicing new ways of being and new ways of thinking. I think the other thing that's really important to leading is that relationships matter, right? Taking the time to understand each of these other women and their stories and a little bit about them, of who they are as people. I think that there's so much richness in that, and you can better understand what motivates folks and how you can actually be a part of their story and you of theirs, right? So we are a bigger movement, and I think us being able to really have those critical conversations when needed is part of being generous, is part of showing up and giving your time and your heart and opening your heart to other women in this movement and the people that we serve.
Nicole, always appreciate you. Every time we have a conversation, you're talking about leading with love, but also having sharp elbows. And I love that, that contrast there, because we need both, right? To be able to make sure that we birth the world that our communities are looking for. Linda, how about you? How do you lead with generosity during this time, especially during this time of transition?
Thank you so much, Nana. And I'm so deeply honored and humbled to be here with all of you today. And I wish we were together in real life. I was texting Sayu. I don't do well in virtual spaces. I'm an organizer. I like to be around people. And I truly believe in something that Maya Angelou said, that I'm going to paraphrase, where she said, it's not about the words that you use, it's how you make people feel. And one thing that I am very intentional about in the movement, and many people know me, is that when I am with you and I'm having a conversation with you, you are the most important person to me in that moment. It's allowing people to be seen and to be recognized. I'm very well known for texting and calling women leaders across this country. On a daily basis, I choose somebody to say, hey, how you doing? You doing okay? You need anything? I see you. Because oftentimes in this movement, we do overlook each other. We oftentimes are so overwhelmed with our own lives, our own responsibilities, that we don't take the time to say to somebody else, I see you on these streets. I see what you're doing. My generosity comes from my culture. I'm a daughter of Palestinian immigrants. I come from a very hospitable and generous culture that tells me that I am part of a larger village, and that I also have a role to play in making my village the strong and united and a thriving community. And that is what my mother and father came from, a very small, tiny village in an occupied part of Palestine to the United States of America. And they brought that with them, and they have instilled that in me. I also saw a quote once about 10 years ago that really spoke to how I organize with and build relationships, and deep ones in the movement, which is there is a special place in hell for women who do not help other women. And I believe that. I believe God got it set up. If you are a woman who has opportunities, who has doors that you can open for other women, particular other women of color and Black women, if you know that there is a space that could be held by somebody else, and you decide not to take that opportunity, that you decide that you do not want to see a woman who is struggling in our movement or someone who's down in the movement, and you don't take the time to uplift them, there is a special place in hell for you. And I know that doesn't sound very generous, but I hope it inspires us to continue to support one another. And we say this in the movement often. And we do this Asada chant. And I always tell people, like, if you're gonna chant this chant, you can't just use the words, you gotta engage in the action. We say we must love and protect one another. And I am committed to being part of a movement where I will protect and I will love women in this movement, and I will show up for them when it is necessary or when they call upon me to be here. So that is my version of leadership in love, and leadership that is also sharp elbowed, because I'm ready to fight for my people. I'm ready to fight for women in the movement too. So call me when you need me.
Certainly, we got to have you on speed dial. Thank you so much. And, there's a generosity of clarity of where people going to go if they don't do the right thing. That's also an offering. And thank you for that. But culture, when you said that, I'm thinking myself about, the Akan culture that I come from. It's a matriarchal culture. It's a matrilineal culture, right? And so it's one in which we are taught about how we connect with one another. And both you and Nicole touched on this the touching, the reach out and touch, the making sure that we're okay, right? And keeping us good. So thank you so very much. We know that in this movement for social justice, that we need all sorts of talents and leadership styles. So, Greisa, what is unique about the way that you lead, right? People lead differently, and we know that in our movement, sometimes people think, well, women lead in this particular way. We know that that's not the case. What's the unique way that you lead?
So, buenas noches, good evening, everyone. My name is Greisa Martinez Rosas. I am the daughter of Luis and Elia Martinez. I am undocumented, unafraid, queer, and unashamed. And I am the reflection of my ancestors. And in my own unique way, I bring the stories, the pain, the joy, the songs that have laid the groundwork for me to be with all of you tonight. I also recognize that I am part of a through line that goes through Carmelita Torres, which is a woman that started the bath riots in Texas that refused to have the bodies of migrant workers be sprayed by pesticides. The through line of Palestinian freedom fighters that refuse to have occupation of their land, and the people all across the country, and the Black women that have led the nation's largest social movement. I stand in that through line, and I really am really clear that the purpose of United We Dream, the purpose of the work that we're doing, is to hang on to what I call the discipline of hope. That one day, though the woes of this moment might be big, and I can tell you, sisters and brothers, that I am tired as we enter this last stretch of this 2020, but I feel that good kind of tired where you put up your fight, you left everything on the field. We won and continue to win against Donald Trump. And so what makes me, the gifts that I bring to the movement is this fierce discipline of hope that we will ensure that we will continue to fight and that we will continue to win, because there's a long arc and there are through lines that will come through me to ensure that other people have a place to lead.
Absolutely. It's what the great Maria Macaba teaches us, right? Second gen Black immigrant woman, that hope is a discipline. The great abolitionist letting us know. And thank you, Greisa, for telling us how we put that into action. Nicole, can we hear from you next about how you lead, the unique way that you lead?
Sure. So I've always had sort of a knack for bringing people together. So it's fitting that I should lead NPNA, which is to build out a multi-ethnic, multiracial coalition. And so I think that one of the gifts, one of my superpowers, is to really create the space for people to come together and to really look around and see who's missing from our tent or our village and bring them into the fold. And so it's one of the things that has sort of marked my entire life. I've always been really one of the more welcoming people you could possibly meet, and to break bread with others and to really sit down and understand their stories is one of the gifts that I bring. And so it's fitting that I should be here with all of you, bringing you together in this way, given that that is my super talent.
Thank you so very much. And this last question is going to be for all of you. We know that doing the important work of social change can be draining. Someone in the first panel was talking about it just being exhausting, right? But we've got to avoid burnout. We know that we want to be here. We got to stay healthy. We got to stay hydrated, right? We've got to do the things that we need to do to continue for the long haul. So how do you care for and sustain yourselves? And I'm going to start with Linda.
I'm probably the wrong person, Anna, to be asking, because I was about to hear from everybody else, because maybe I could learn a thing or two. I'm actually coming to you from the state of Georgia, and a lot of people after the election took a sigh of relief and said, we won this election, we defeated Donald Trump, and I'm back on the street because we need to win these 2 Senate races. I don't really understand self-care very much. I say to people that I have a different way of thinking about self-care. Like, I feel good being in the streets of Georgia. I moved during the summer from August to the end of October before I went back out for elections. I moved to Louisville, Kentucky to work on the case for justice for Breonna Taylor. And while it was the circumstances of the Breonna Taylor case are so horrific, that we lost a Black woman who was literally sleeping in her own home, I felt joy being amongst the people of Louisville and organizing and building a solidarity movement to say her name across this country. That gave me, that filled my heart. That Breonna Taylor's name is is on billboards, is on national television, is in documentaries, is that people are saying her name and continuing to fight for justice. So for me, self-care is in the movement. I feel good in the movement. I feel good being around people who are authentic, who are genuine, who are also unapologetic. And one question you asked, Nicole, since I can't really answer the self-care question because I'm not a good self-care kind of person, something about leadership, and I'm calling people to it again. I've called people at Nick to this many times before. This is always the moment to be unapologetic about who you are. One thing that I will bring to the movement, have brought to the movement, will always bring to the movement is I'm going to be unapologetic. I'm going to say abolish ICE. I'm going to say defund the police. I don't care who says what and what tells us not to say. And I'm going to say free them all. And I'm going to do all of that. And I want people to understand that this is the moment under this new administration to stand your ground, to be leaders in this movement, to show bravery and courage, and not to water down our people's oppression so we can appease people who did not, in fact, even help us win this election and defeat the fascists. What I'm concerned about right now is you want to applaud Black voters for winning an election. You want to say the Latinos went out to the streets. You want to say the Asian American Pacific Islanders. Those are the people that I'm going to be organizing, expanding for 2024. So that's my self-care. My self-care is recognizing the power that we have always proven over and over and over again. And still the communication folks they bring to the movement tell us the messaging got to change. You got to do this and you got to say that. So I'm with the abolitionists. I went from, F the police to abolish the police. They said, don't say that. Don't say F the police. Now I'm at the defund the police and I'm staying there, Nana. And I'm happy about it. I'm excited about it. And that gives me joy to be unapologetic for the next generation and the next 7 generations to come, as our Indigenous family has taught us. So take care of yourselves. Do the things that I don't do. I'll learn at some point, but I'm sure Greisa and others are going to tell you how to take care of yourselves.
Absolutely. I'm in the same take care of yourself role that you are. But I listen to Nicole and Sulma and Rosa and others. I listen to what they say. Greisa, please help us. How do we take care and sustain ourselves?
I think it's important to be able to embrace like our Indigenous traditions and the things that ring true to yourself as you define what self-care is for you. So actually, there's a toxicity sometimes in like the framing of, I'm not a stranger to spa days. I like to be pampered, but I also feel like it's important to like figure out what works for you. So what works for me is standing in my rightful and truthful power, to demanding exactly what my people deserve. What works for me is to go swimming in big oceans where I feel the presence of my mom every time my skin touches the water. My self-care and where I feel my lightest is when I think about the words of a Black immigrant poem, June Jordan, that said that we have come too far, that we will not turn around, that we will flood the streets with justice because we are freedom bound. That is the way where my heart feels strengthened, renewed. And whenever I get to chant and take over streets and negotiate with the members of United We Dream, that is how I care for myself and for those that I love.
Thank you so much. Nicole, last word on this topic.
I would say along the same lines, centered in our people and in the people that we work for and with alongside every day. Mariana Rosa at the beginning of the day pulled out a picture of an individual who was living on the streets from Nicaragua, and like that image and the heart and connection to that person's story and my own family's story and my children's story down the line is what motivates me to try to be whole and to try to really find a way to always remember that we are all part of this ecosystem of change and that rest is okay, right? I think that all of us have sort of jumped in again, like post-election it is critical that we move forward. But I think that one of the messages people really need to hear from all of us is that it's okay to rest. It's okay to, sleep 7 hours a night, at least. It's okay for you to do that. And we can be relentless in our quest for justice, but remember the simple pleasures to break bread with people who are on this panel and with people in your community and to build those relationships that will sustain and feed your soul.
Absolutely. It is really critical. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for your dedication and for your thoughtful answers. So, at this time, I'd like to close out this part of the panel by turning it over to Ai-jen Poo of the National Domestic Workers Alliance for her message to women leaders everywhere.
One of the highlights of this tough time in our history for me has been watching women lead. As someone who's rooted in a movement of domestic workers, of women, that's really about uplifting the care and cleaning work that women, especially Black and immigrant women of color, have always done throughout our history. I'm surrounded by the power of women. And it's been such a grounding force for me for the 20-some years that I've been an organizer. And in this period in history, while we're still underestimated by some, our power as women is really undeniable and unstoppable. Over the last few years, women's organizing and leadership has been a beacon of hope in the darkness, and we've seen women show up to protest, to stop family separation, to run for office, to champion bold solutions, to organize for change over and over. And there's not one single issue that defines this energy. It's really about the whole of humanity and a future that recognizes and lifts up the whole of who we are as people in this country, regardless of race, age, ability, gender identity, or experience. Women lift each other up, especially through times of crisis. And we celebrate one another's wins and joy. We hold one another's pain through incredible loss of life and livelihoods, even in a pandemic, especially in a pandemic. We're the first responders to crises. We're essential workers. For women who are newer to activism and organizing, we just have a lot to learn from each other. We should remember that we are always in a process of growth and change and transformation, and we never have to do anything alone. That our power actually lies on leaning on one another. I've learned this from caregivers and domestic workers over the years who are just full of wisdom and insight. And I think as people who've been bearing the brunt of responsibility for caring for our families, caregivers just know that from the time we're born, we count on others to care for us, to remind us of our unique contributions and our gifts, our shortcomings and our imperfections, and to help us stay human and whole and powerful throughout. So I've learned from domestic workers and caregivers to believe in squads, teams, villages, and to build movements that are full of leaders with a room to grow infinitely. In fact, that is how we grow. It's not a zero sum. And knowing that it's not a zero sum sustains me because I know I'm important, but so is everyone else. And there's so much power in that. And more importantly, that power can be sustained. There's longevity in that. And that's important because our vision for justice and dignity and fairness and inclusion, it's going to take a long time to realize. But we know what to do as women and how to do it.
Thank you, Ai-jen, for your reflections and your relentless leadership. To learn more about her work, you can check out her bio on the NIC website. At this time, our speakers will address some questions from you, our viewers, to kick things off. I'll turn it over to Linda.
Thank you so much, Nana and Ai-jen. So the question I got is, I admire you very much, Linda. I appreciate that, whoever you are. You speak up for Muslims, Black lives, and of course, women. How can we be multifaceted organizers and show others how to make these intersectional connections? That's a great question, and it's at the core of a strong movement. I've been an intersectional organizer before anybody started branding conferences around intersectionality, doing panels, writing articles about it. You know, this is a term, as many of you know, that was given to us, gifted to us by a Black woman scholar, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. And she was very specific when she talked about intersectionality, the idea of the intersections of our oppression and also of our identities. Another great Black woman also taught us that we cannot have single issue struggles because we don't live single issue lives. And even when you say that I stand up for Black lives and for Muslims and women, but we actually have Black Muslim women, Black immigrant Muslim women. So just those identities in of themselves intersect in the work that I do and in the communities that I come from. We will never be a strong movement. We will never win transformative change if we do not start seeing people as whole human beings. You cannot ask people in the movement to come to an immigrant rights movement and not talk about gender justice or economic justice, or talk about how the climate impacts people, not just here in the United States, but across the world. So for me, if we're going to really win, if we're not going to do these incremental changes that we have seen, and I'm not diminishing the work that people have done, in order for us to bring true transformational justice to our communities, we must. It's a good tactic. It's a good philosophy. It's a great ideology. We cannot win without being intersectional in the way that we approach our work, our movement, but more importantly, people. And I think, Nana, you brought up something great about something that you were talking about Nicole. For a long time, Black immigrants did not feel like they were a part of the immigrant rights movement. Oftentimes, our Muslim communities in the context of national security reform actually felt like they were being thrown under the bus in the immigrant rights movement. And until we came to the table, we all came to the table, we were all equal at the table, we started to see real transformative change, both in our movements, but also politically and electorally. So intersectionality is the only way to do this work, because that is how we live and breathe every single day. Greisa.
Thanks. I'm feeling that. Okay, so there's a question for Twitter. It says, Greisa, you lead a powerful organization. Oh, thank you. And with the DACA announcement, many have renewed hope. Oh, yes, we won on Friday. Lots of joy there. It says, thank you for the work of UWD. My question is, what is next for the undocumented youth and the fight for papers, and most importantly, liberation? Yo, this is like one of my favorite questions and what I love to talk about all the time. I'll say this. We won after 4 years of Donald Trump attacking DACA, attacking immigrants, forced hysterectomies, the deaths of our children in detention camps. We have survived, we have thrived, and we defended DACA at the Supreme Court. But we fought for DACA not because we believe that is sort of like this precious population of people that must be defended, but we saw it as a through line to be able to make the case about why 11 million undocumented people, why the refugees and migrants that are coming to the US should be welcome and belong in this country. And Donald Trump and no one else can tell us who belongs here or who doesn't, because our home is here. And so I think that what is next and what we understand at United We Dream is that DACA is the floor and not the ceiling. We are proud and excited to be able to launch a campaign to demand exactly what we deserve, which is a moratorium on deportations, ensuring that undocumented people are released from detention centers. We are demanding bold, broad administrative actions for 11 million folks, and that we know that permanent protection is the only way to be able to ensure that undocumented folks are protected from ICE and CBP. But overall, we know that citizenship is just one marker over the long arc of liberation. And that we know what Linda was just saying, that like we will not be free until Black people are able to walk the streets and be able to breathe. That we have not fixed the issue of immigration because it is a racial justice issue. People benefit from the fact that we remain undocumented 40 years later. People benefit from the fact that DHS has grown to be a $20 billion department that is only used to be able to hurt our communities. And so for United We Dream, the members of United We Dream, our power is undeniable after having ensured that millions of Latinos, of young people have turned out to vote. Our demands are undeniable without being super clear about what we demand. And our vision for the people that we want and for the people that we love is also undeniable, and we are ready. So I'm gonna kick it back to my sister, Virginia, to answer the next question from social media.
Oh my gosh, I have to come after Linda and Grecia. This is so hard. But my question was from somebody, a Nick participant actually, who asked, who have been influential women of color for you? And there are so many, it's a hard list, but I do want to start. I'm fortunate to be the daughter of two mothers. And so my Boricua mother, who raised me, who came here to this country with nothing. She was a factory worker. She organized people in her factory when she saw unjust working conditions. She was somebody who worked so hard to give us more opportunities and to be able to learn to stand in our power as women. So I think that's, you always have to acknowledge your foundation. But so many women over time, Doña Dolores Huerta, right? That is for so many of us, somebody who is just the foundation for much of the work we've done. Dr. Dorothy Height, there's an incredible story about Dr. Dorothy Height that she told, and it was always something that sat with me as a woman. She would say that whenever there were pictures, there are lots of pictures from the civil rights movement, and she was a tall woman, so she would always be placed at the end. And she's cropped out of so many of those pictures so that all you see is men. And she would tell this story about, it doesn't matter if I wasn't in the picture, I was there and I know what I did and I know the women I brought along with me. And I think that that's something that's, always been something that has inspired me, is everybody's not going to know what you do, but you bring people with you anyway. And then I think I actually add Linda, who I have admired her career as an organizer for so long. And one of the things I want to uplift for you, Linda, and it's not to embarrass you or anything, but one of the things I admire and what is so influential is that you stand in the face of danger, of threats, of people attacking you, of harm to your physical personhood. And for me, the fact that somebody can still stand in this work joyfully, is just such an inspiration for me. And I want to thank you and honor that that you offer to us and that you give to yourself, and you and Tamika both, who I know that's like your partner in crime. But I do say I saw a post that she put on Instagram the other day, and it just made me want to cry, because the horrible things that people would say and the attacks, and not everybody has to face that. Many of us do get to do our work quietly behind the scenes. Not everybody is in front and visible, and they're the ones who become the target. And you've taken it for so many of us, so that so many of us don't have to. And so I just want to lift you up in this as well and say thank you. And I will pass this along to Sayu.
Thank you, Virginia. My question is from another NIC attendee. Can you share some real life scenarios for uplifting emerging leaders that may have limited English skills? Many of the refugee women we work with often had to quit school at a young age to help in their homes. So what I would say to that is that example of multiple people, it's a more generic group example, to me represents a lot of the characteristics that we need in our leaders. The skill to learn something new, to reinvent, your resilience, your ability to navigate difficult situations. Those characteristics are the kind of characteristics that we want to see in leaders. And at New American Leaders, the training that we do is really designed by immigrants for immigrants. It's exactly set up to respond to these kinds of perceptions that we have of ourselves as being limited, when in fact these qualities are assets to the American leadership experience. I mean, imagine if we had people who spoke multiple languages in leadership. Imagine if we had people who had to go through the kind of hardship that some of us and that some of these women you're describing have to go through in order to be here or stay here, and how that would inform the way they lead and how that would inform the way that they form policy. So I see all of this not as a limitation, and the organization and the training that we provide and the support that we provide also sees all of this as assets to be leveraged in order to create the kind of leaders that we need and that we want to see and don't see enough of in our country today. And I'll pass it over to Rosa.
Hi, thank you. So my question is from Twitter. What is your message for women re-entering society after incarceration, and how can those of us working with them best support and advocate? So my message for women re-entering society after incarceration, which for me is either prison, jail, detention, any sort of confinement, is you're not alone. You have survived one of the most dehumanizing and oppressive systems that we have in this country. And there is going to be an uphill battle for you to rebuild your life after this experience. I wish I could tell you it's going to be easy, but it's not. Sadly, most of the programs and policies, reentry policy and programs, are designed for men. So there are going to be obstacles, but you, like I say before, you had already survived so much. There are people out here like me and organizations like the organization I work for that are here to support you in your new journey. And my message for people who are working with this population is, one, don't make assumptions or blanket statements about formerly incarcerated people. While some of the experiences are similar, the needs and the obstacles and the lack of opportunities that each of them face are different. Also, make sure that formerly incarcerated people are at the center of your work. And to me, that means not just as the client or the program participant, but also are the people who are leading the work. Hire formerly incarcerated people, train formerly incarcerated people. And I'm being particularly troubled recently because I'm seeing this new trend of having formerly incarcerated people or directly impacted people being part of conversations and panels and, sharing their stories, which is a great step forward, but it's not enough. So now it's becoming this thing, which is very funder motivated, where, we've been pushing back, you need to compensate people for sharing their stories and their experiences. So now we're seeing that happening, that they're willing to compensate them for their stories and for sharing their voices. And that's it. And then there's no more engagement after that. So there's like a different level of tokenism. So I want to encourage everybody to do more than that, right? It's not just about getting them to share their stories. It's about having it at the table when we're planning, when we're implementing any program, any initiative, any policy that it has a direct impact on their lives. And lastly, my other message to formerly incarcerated people is that I just hope that you'll get to realize that your experience was connected to a larger system of oppression, and there were people and corporations and systems that have benefited from your incarceration. And I hope that will help you in some way kind of deal with the traumatic experience and alleviate some of the pain, just knowing that it had very little to do with you, although it feels so personal, and it is personal. And then I will pass it to Sulma.
Thank you, Rosa. And so my question, just the last question for this panel, is from a unique attendee. And the question is, we women need to take immigration human rights to the next level. We should be connecting and working towards a complete, inclusive immigration reform. We are talking about DACA, TPS, essential workers, refugees, and asylum, and all other 11 million. I would like to know, what is the plan? Are we supporting single issue policies, or are we going for all at once? Oh, this is a great question. And I'm gonna build on some of what Greisa, Linda, and others have been saying or have said here in the last 20 minutes or so. First of all, I want to say that I've been in this work for 21 years and started with, the immigrant rights issue. And we have learned and gone through so much in the last 20 years, but especially I would say the last 10 years. And to the first question, which is, what is the plan? I would say, and what I say that to people is that the plan, and the most important part of the plan, which is, the full plan will take probably more than 3 minutes that I have today. But the most important part of the plan, which I've shared with others throughout the NIC today, is that the most important part of the plan is for us to know that nothing will be given to us unless we fight for it. And that if we've learned anything from the last 10 years is that this is a fight till the end. And I also shared with people today that if this new administration needs to be met not by grand organization or structure in Washington, D.C. It needs to be met by the full force and strength of the people who voted, the people who are directly affected. And the most important thing that we can do, and the only thing that's gonna get us any kind of win that we may get in this next 2 or 4 years, is people out there engaging and creating the conditions from the outside that's going to get the job done. That is probably the most important part of the plan that we can engage in. And that's the part that I, along with many people in this panel, are trying to make happen, because it's the part that I believe in the most and the part that I believe needs to get done. And are we supporting a single issue, or are we going all at once? Look, we want it all. We want everything that we deserve. But the reality is that we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do, not only for the 11 million, but just to really center, as others talked about on this panel, is just to really center the fight for the 11 million for immigrant rights in a broader set of economic and racial justice issues that are wrong in this country. And we've got a long way to go to really invest and really dig deep into what that conversation is about. So anybody watching the NIC at this moment, you need to join the movement, because we have a lot of work to do. And the inspiring thing to me is that we as women are learning, are working together, are learning from each other, are talking to each other. And that's the only way to get it done. So I invite everyone watching and being part of the NIC at this moment to join us. We need you. That wraps up the questions. And so wrap up the question and answer section. I want to thank you all for your questions. Again, we need you to join us, because we need to increase and grow our forces. Thank you so much for the questions, for your words of affirmation. And most importantly, thank you to all of you fellow women in this panel and those watching us. Keep doing the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back to you, Maria.
Thank you, Sulma. Before you log off tomorrow, make sure that you're registered. If you aren't already, visit NIICnewamericanDreams.org/register-2020. I want to thank, first of all, Nana, thank you and your amazing leadership, Baji, across the globe. We come to an end of what will be known as the NIC 2020 Bruja panel. Thank you, Sayu, for naming it. Closing out an amazing and fabulous first day of the National Immigrant Integration Conference 2020. Thank you to the inspiring and truth-telling panelists in our audience, completely in love with these freedom-fighting, justice-loving women. Truth-telling. We possess everything we need to take on our efforts to dismantle systems of oppression and spark the joy of liberation, defining it as you wish. Be sure to join us tomorrow for day 2, where we'll talk about rebuilding the economy and healing a divided nation by moving from inclusion to belonging. Our deep dives will go into key topics such as fundraising in the era of COVID-19, the state and local wins in this time, migration and climate change, as well as healthcare justice. We have several VIPs and more captivating performances. So if you're not registered again for the NIC, you can still register to join us for day 2. I think I'll give you the link again, but it's pinned on the Facebook live stream. If you're watching in the conference platform Socio, then you're already registered to join tomorrow. But if you're not, NIC niccnewamericandreams.org/register-2020. Thank you. May you stay strong and clear and fierce and tender. Thank you for your advocacy to lift up all peoples, including immigrants and refugees across the nation and across the globe. And may peace be with you.
Future is a woman with a head held high and an afro on her shoulders, reaching up for the sky. And the knowledge of her people is filling up her mind. She understands manipulation, won't fall for it this time. An era evolution, are you part of its might? You invited to the party, but you better step right. At the center is love, it will be different this time. We are here to imagine what the future looks like. We are here to imagine. We are here to imagine. We are here to imagine. We are here to imagine what the future looks like. The future is a man who knows his feminine side. He doesn't feel diminished when he hurts or he cries. Binary's always trouble, polarize us in our struggle. We are greater than our bubble. Who you are, you define. While we're here, we do the work to alchemize our pain and hurt beyond the limits of our minds to what the future looks like. We are here to imagine. We are here to imagine. We are here to imagine. We are here to imagine what the future looks like. What you cannot see, you can't make into reality. What you cannot see, you can't make into reality. We are here to imagine. 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 What do you imagine?